The scream of metal against turbulence jolted the cabin so violently that the little girl's juice cup flew from her hands and splattered across the floor. At the same moment, the CEO in the crimson dress lifted her champagne with a smirk, glancing sideways at the single dad struggling to calm his daughter. The airplane trembled again, harder this time, making overhead bins rattle as if something inside wanted to claw its way out. A few rows ahead, a flight attendant's voice cracked over the intercom, announcing a sudden systems malfunction. And just like that, fear, raw, cold, and unfiltered, spread through the passengers like a silent storm. If you're watching Kindness Diaries, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in hope, compassion, and second chances. The single dad's name was Rowan Hale, a man who carried exhaustion in the shadows under his eyes and tenderness in the way he pulled his daughter closer while trying not to shake. Life had carved him into a quiet survivor. After losing his wife in a car accident 2 years earlier, he had become both mother and father to little Arya, the only part of his heart he still allowed to shine. He worked nights repairing small aircraft engines, barely managing to support her, and they were on this flight because Arya had begged to see the ocean her mother once promised she'd show her. Rowan had said yes, even though money was tight, because guilt whispered to him every night that he wasn't enough, not for Arya, not for the memory of the woman he loved. Across the aisle, Cassandra Vale, the CEO whose confidence filled the cabin before the plane even took off, had noticed him when he boarded. She judged him instantly, the worn-out shirt, the scuffed shoes, the way he hurried to tuck Arya's curls behind her ear as if trying to hide how rough life had been on both of them. Cassandra had risen to wealth through ruthless ambition, convincing herself that winning was the only way to silence the memory of a childhood in which she had never been anyone's priority. So when she saw Rowan fumbling with Arya's seatbelt earlier, she had let out a tiny laugh, the kind designed to remind others of their place, before whispering to another first-class passenger about people like him. Rowan had heard it all. He always did. The plane shook again, and this time lights flickered. The cockpit door opened abruptly, and the captain stepped out, his face drained of color. He wasn't supposed to leave the controls, but something beyond protocol had driven him out. Rowan noticed the trembling in the man's hands, the hollow rise and fall of his chest. The captain scanned the cabin, voice barely steady as he raised it above the rising panic around him, asking if there was any fighter pilot on board. Not just a pilot, specifically a fighter pilot. The type trained for chaos, split-second decisions, and battles where one mistake could cost hundreds of lives. Rowan's heart punched against his ribs. Memories he had locked away years ago tried to claw back to the surface. He had once been that man. A decorated fighter pilot who flew rescue missions, who defied every limit, who earned the call sign Aegis because others trusted him with their lives. But after the accident that took his wife, he walked away from the sky, convinced that he didn't deserve the privilege of saving others when he couldn't save the one he loved. Before Rowan could even stand, Cassandra shot him a mocking look, assuming he was about to panic like everyone else. But the moment her eyes met his, something shifted. She noticed the way his breathing steadied in a strangely controlled rhythm, the way his shoulders squared as if accepting a weight he thought he had buried forever. Rowan didn't look like a man scared for his life, he looked like someone who had made peace with fear long ago. The captain scanned Rowan again, locking onto the quiet strength rising beneath the layers of grief. Rowan finally nodded, whispering only loud enough for the captain to hear that he had flown F-15s during the final years of his service. The captain's relief was instant, fragile, desperate. He explained that the co-pilot had collapsed mid-flight, that an electrical failure was corrupting the navigation system, and that they were losing altitude faster than they should. Rowan felt the old instincts awaken, not gently, but sharply, like a blade drawn after years of rust. Arya's tiny hand curled around his sleeve, her eyes wide but trusting. Rowan knelt beside her, brushing her curls back just like he always did, promising silently that he would come back. Cassandra watched this moment with something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Shame, heavy and burning. She had laughed at this man, dismissed him, judged him without knowing he was the only reason this flight had any chance of surviving. Memories of her own father, a pilot who abandoned her for another family, stabbed her unexpectedly. She had spent years believing that anyone who looked like Rowan must also be unreliable. But seeing him now, courage radiating from a place beyond pride, cracked something she didn't realize was fragile. The cockpit felt suffocating when Rowan stepped inside. Warning lights pulsed like frantic heartbeats. The horizon outside tilted, sun slicing across the sky in sharp blinding streaks. Every instinct, every memory, every muscle remembered what to do. Rowan's hands hovered over the controls with a reverence he never thought he'd feel again. He spoke calmly to the captain, recalculating descent angles, scanning weather patterns, searching for any opening, a strip of coastline, a flat stretch of land, anything. He found one. Barely. Impossible for most pilots, but not for someone who had once pulled wounded soldiers out of burning skies. Back in the cabin, Cassandra sat rigid, shoulders trembling as she replayed every cold assumption she made. She thought about power, status, and how empty both felt when life stripped away the illusion of control. She watched Arya clutch her seatbelt, whispering that her daddy was brave, that he always came back. Something warm and painful tightened Cassandra's throat. She envied that kind of faith, the kind she had never been given. The plane descended, shaking harder as Rowan fought the failing systems tooth and nail. Sweat lined his brow, but his voice remained steady, guiding the captain, adjusting flaps manually, countering wind shear with reflexes born from years of life-or-death missions. They broke through a layer of dense clouds just as the strip of emergency landing terrain appeared, small, rough, but reachable. Rowan whispered something to himself, a promise to the woman he lost, begging her to watch over their daughter. Then he committed. The impact was thunderous, carving a scar across the earth as metal tore through dirt. Seats lurched forward. Cassandra clung to her armrest, tears spilling freely. Arya screamed for her father. And then, finally, the plane ground to a halt in a cloud of dust and trembling silence. When Rowan stepped back into the cabin, alive and steady, Arya launched herself into his arms. Around them, passengers cried, clapped, or simply stared at him with disbelief and gratitude. Cassandra stood too, her face streaked with tears, walking toward him slowly as though approaching something holy. She whispered an apology, not elegant, not rehearsed, but raw and human. Rowan said nothing, but the softness in his eyes told her he didn't hold anger. Life was too short for that. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps these emotional stories reach more people. Please comment your thoughts before the final message. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon that evening, Rowan carried Arya off the broken aircraft, her small arms wrapped around his neck. Cassandra watched them go, humbled by the quiet strength of a man the world might overlook, but who rose when everything was falling. In that moment, everyone who survived understood something profound, that true power isn't measured by wealth, status, or luxury seats. It's found in the hearts of those who rise for others, even when their own hearts are shattered. And as Rowan stepped into the warmth of daylight with his daughter safe against his chest, the world felt, for a moment, full of second chances.